This is Phantom Electric Ghost. We're live on the air with Nismah Osman for the first time. How you doing tonight?
Hey, Phantom, I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing all right. We're almost near the end of the year, and you are a songwriter, music producer, and contrarian thinker. And we're going to talk
Yes, I
about
am.
uh, how you can beat the system. We've actually got that up as the actual topic tonight: beat the system, building a music empire without burning out. And then we also
Yeah,
have your website, which is nismahosman.com, and then it has a /call. I'm sure you can just click on that when we're published, and it will go right to that link, and
perfect.
people will be able to contact you that way. But we do want to mention we are a featured podcast on Newsly. You can see that icon up there. It says listen on Newsly, and if you use that coupon code of Ghost, they can check that out for 30 days free. Later tonight, we will be on Newsly. With the audio version of this podcast, we will be on all the other podcast platforms where you can watch or listen later tomorrow. And so we'll give you a landing page for that. But tonight, we'll be talking to you about your experience. Maybe you can give the audience your kind of brief story, your background, so they know who you are and what you're
Sure.
all about.
Yeah, sure. So, I kind of got my start young, like most music heads. I started writing music when I was just a kid. My first songs, albeit they were terrible, were at, as young as I can remember, like 7 or 8. I just got bit by the music bug so young, and then it just kind of kept going. I taught myself how to play piano. We had this old piano in my garage, and I would just go out there and tinker. And then it turned into learning guitar, and then it turned into studying songwriting, and then that turned into me kind of figuring out how to produce. And I bought my first little my laptop and my recording software and my first mic, and it just kind of one thing led to another, and then I ended up studying it in college. And then here I am now. Now I guess how many years later, 5 or 6 years later, post college, and I write music largely for film and TV. So I do sync licensing, and it's what I'm really excited about and passionate about these days, and helping other artists learn how to do that as well, and take advantage of that excellent income stream.
Yeah, that's something I've been wanting to get into, but I got so many hats. I'm a software designer, I'm a podcaster, and I'm a musician. I'm more of a modular musician. I've been playing since I was 17. I'm 56.
Nice.
And I just like to create what I call sound experiments where I would just take everything I've been doing since I was 17,
Mm.
finding Moogs in the pawn shop and then
Yeah.
bringing them back to life and then into Roland Junos and just I've been around, if you really, I'm a child of the 70s. So I kind of grew up with like the hippie music of the Hendrix
Yep.
and Doors and Zeppelin,
Yep.
saw punk and new wave, all those bands, and I just like everything. So my
Yep.
music is kind of like expansive. Like I grew up
Hmm.
liking like everything from Johnny Cash to the Clash to
Oh
Miles
yeah.
Davis to Sun.
Yeah.
So I'm just kind of all over the map. And when I started a podcast to talk to musicians,
Yep.
back in 2016, this is actually episode 1034, and we've
Wow.
been on the air since 2016. And it's gotten bigger. We've been able to talk. We've talked to some Grammy award-winning producers, and we have some
Amazing.
pretty cool people. We've talked to bands from like Japan, Germany, Argentina,
Wow.
like
Around
everywhere.
the
People
world. That's
around the
amazing.
world. It's just because we just feel like creative people, need a place to talk.
Yeah.
And so that's what we did here is to be able to talk to creative people. And when interested in what you've been able to do is you've kind of cracked that nut to get into sync licensing. A lot of us who
Mhm.
are like indie musicians or experimental musicians, we kind of like haven't been able to get into that as much because a lot of our stuff maybe doesn't fit the format. And I'd be very interested in figuring
Yeah.
out like or having you tell that story of how did you get there?
Yeah, absolutely. So my foray into sync licensing actually happened on accident. It's kind of a cool story. When I was 13, I went to a singer-songwriter convention, just a little one that they were having in my town. and they were doing this little, talent show, and my friend kind of pushed me up on stage. I didn't really want to do it, but I did it, and I sang this original song that I'd written maybe a couple months prior, and it went kind of poorly. I messed up a couple lines, and you could tell I was nervous, but I did it. And then when I was done, I went down off stage, and after the performance was over, a publisher came up to me and was like, "I think that song is really great, and I think it would do really well in film and TV."
Oh,
And
wow.
mind you, again, I was 13, and I was like, I had no idea what he was talking about, and I was like, "Okay, sounds good. Let's do it." Right? Like, not
Mhm.
knowing, I heard film and TV, and I was like, "Okay, that sounds official." So he kind of helped me get the song recorded. He sent me up to a recording studio up in North Jersey. I'm from South Jersey, and that was just a great experience. And then he had this whole band recorded, and that song has been placed on, I don't even know how many, probably hundreds of TV shows and movies and commercials worldwide since that day back in, what was it, 2010, I guess. And so that was kind of my first foray into sync licensing. And after that point, I kind of, it was exciting and it was validating, but it kind of dropped off because I was still in high school, and I was kind of finishing being a kid and a teenager. And then years later, when I was just about to wrap up my degree, I was listening to a podcast similar to this, actually. And the person being interviewed was talking about sync licensing. And I was like, oh, I kind of did that. And that song is still kind of does things. Maybe I should get back into it. And then from that point on, I just, things started to just kind of develop pretty quickly. And I kind of started to get some decent success in that. And so that was now 6 or 7 years ago since I listened to that podcast. And it's just kind of been my trajectory since then, more or less.
It's interesting what I've heard, and I don't know if this is true, but there's a feeling with a lot of like independent musicians that like once people get into that sync licensing, like the industry likes to use the same people. It seems like
Oh,
once
interesting.
that I've heard that, and it seems like there's like a barrier to entry for people that don't get the opportunity to kind of get in. And maybe is that true or not true? But I've kind of heard that. And so I want to find out, like, have you figured out a formula or a way through the venues or the tools that you use or the distribution networks that you use that you've been able to kind of figure out what the secret sauce is?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm glad you brought it up because I think it's a barrier. It's a preconceived notion that it acts as a barrier for people. So I would say a couple things, and you kind of brought up a couple different points. So I'll go one by one. The first thing is that in terms of people liking to work with the same people and it being hard to kind of break in, I would say that it depends who you're working with, and it depends on how good you are, or how, I should say, how syncable or sync ready your music is when you first approach someone. Because the thing to note about the sync industry is it's really the film and TV and ad industry, and they just happen to use music, right, as the commodity. So what that means is there's a lot more on the line legally. So it's not just like, you're making music and you're distributing it and you're hoping for the best. It's like if you use an uncleared sample, there
Yeah,
you can be
yeah, they're not
sued.
gonna
Like,
go with it. Yeah.
yeah, it's not good. Like, so in that sense, I think people, like everyone else, they like to work with people they trust, and they know who they know what they're doing, and who they know are reliable. So in that sense, yeah, I guess it's maybe a little bit tough to be a newbie, but I guess it's no different than being a newbie anywhere, right? You just kind of have to
Mhm.
earn your street cred, so to speak, right? So there's that. But then there's the piece that's like the secret sauce, I would say, is making sure that you're prioritizing building good relationships with people. And who you're working with makes all the difference in that, because there are hundreds, if not thousands, of sync licensing agencies, and those are the companies that
Mhm.
pitch the music, right, on your behalf to these opportunities, the TV shows and stuff. So, but there are so many agencies that you
Yeah,
might
it's
think,
hard to know.
oh,
Yeah,
well, it's hard to know who to go with, but also
yeah,
you don't. There's a preconceived notion that you need to, that it's shooting spaghetti at the wall. It is maybe at the beginning, but really what you want to do is you want to find like 2 or 3 agencies that really work with their artists, who nurture them, who provide feedback on the music, who are willing to put skin in the game with their time, right? In terms of helping you develop your sound and helping you write good music, and then working with those people who are willing to kind of build that relationship with you. That's the most success I've found so far in sync, is by being less of a, just submit my music on a submission portal, and more let me make relationships with
yeah.
people.
So it's more like you got a booker or an agent than that you're going with
Sort
one of
of.
these. They like there's a lot of agencies that are basically like websites.
Right.
You pay your subscription, you put
Yep.
in, and I've been on those where they're coming from London or from the US or wherever,
Yeah.
and those were like throwing in at the wall. And
Those I would say you have less of a chance at success, especially if you don't know what you're doing, like you don't know how to write music for sync specifically, and you're just kind of shooting whatever catalog you already have.
mhm.
Not to mention you have to pay money to do that. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
it's it's kind I always recommend people don't do that. Um, Not that it doesn't work. I'm sure it works for some people. There's a reason that these services exist, but I always found that I had the most luck actually going out, meeting people, building relationships, and just kind of going the human route.
Now, with the COVID, was that hard, or you were able to do that during COVID, or you were able to do that
Oh,
post COVID?
that was like all I did for 3 months. From March to June, I just made music, and I just had so much fun. I learned a lot.
Mhm. Well, one of the things there's a lot of people I know that we're independent musicians and we don't use samples.
Mhm.
I'm a modular synthesis.
Yeah.
Everything I do is original music, so it's never been an issue clearing samples because I don't play with samples.
Mhm.
And I do very experimental music, so I'm doing like fusion,
Yeah.
like stuff that's like, if you go back in the day, it's kind of like, um I don't know if you if you get back into like Brian Eno type of experiments and stuff like that.
Mm.
So if there are people looking for things that are like hip, that have to be like based on the top 100,
Mm.
like is that more what people are looking for? If you're an experimental artist, if you're like Michael Stipe and REM when they first went on IRS, they weren't the status quo,
Sure.
right? If you're like the Replacements, you weren't the status quo, or a band like Who's Do. So if
Right.
you're like a band like that, that's in that kind of not popular music, is
Mhm.
really sync licensing meant for people who do popular music, or can other genres that are more
No,
experimental, more underground be able to get in?
yeah, so I love that question, and it's open to every genre and subgenre and niche you can think of, because the amount of content that's being made in terms of TV shows and movies is equally as wide, right? Like, just think about how many
Mhm.
I feel like I go on Hulu and Netflix, and there's like a 100 new shows, and I'm like, when did they have time to make
Yeah,
all these
there's a lot of
shows?
opportunity.
And they're so different, and they are, some of them are based in the 60s, and some of them are based in the 1800s, and some of them are based in the future, and
Yeah,
it's
there's
like,
a lot.
there's
Yeah,
just
so
so
there's a lot.
much. Yeah, so the variety is so wide, and so that naturally means that the demand for the variety in music is equally as wide. Now, of course, if you make sort of middle of the road pop music, you'll probably have more opportunities, but that also means you'll have more competition, because it's more likely that more people make that middle of the road type of music too,
Yeah.
right? So, it kind of equals itself out. So, but if you specialize in something kind of a little left of center and you're really good at it and you learn how to kind of tweak it to work for film and TV, I bet you will find great success if you find the right agency that pitches that kind of music.
Yeah, I've been like, because I'm a software guy, I get opportunities to like beta test and work with other software people. Right now, I'm in the middle of like working with these guys that are working with like the Unreal video game engine.
Okay, cool.
And to license music, and my music kind of fits because I'm super experimental. It's a fusion. It's like it's like Brian Eno. It's like a lot of weird stuff, and
Yeah.
it's cross genre. And so there's an opportunity for me to use their capability to be able to create these kind of loops with original music that aren't samples.
Yep.
That are coming from guys like us, modular synthesis.
Yeah.
Or analog synth, or experimental electronic musicians. Like like that Keith Emerson type people like that, Rick Wakeman. I mean, that's where my Bernie Worrell, that's the people I look up to.
Yeah.
So that is not kind of what's going on today. But for video games, they're like soundtracks.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
And so when you can score them like that, there's a lot of opportunity with a lot of, there's independent video game companies, just like indie film, and they need tons of content because there's music that goes with these games. And there's actually the royalty rates are way higher than like Spotify.
Oh,
yeah. So I mean, it's like a lot of times it's like, so then as it goes into the questions, like we know streaming is kind of like the radio. It kind of gets people to like know your music around the world, but you don't usually get the big pay check from that.
Yeah.
It's the licensing. It's actually, if you're a band, if you show up at a gig in New York, and I played in New York and Boston, make more money playing a gig for an hour than I do in Spotify for like months or even a year. I make more money just playing a gig.
Yep.
So like the sync licensing, if we opened it up, people realize it's like, should you even be playing that game, trying to run around with your economy line van, showing up at gigs, or focus on trying to get your stuff into film, TV, and video games.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's what I teach people. I mean, it's all about figuring out, kind of zooming out and saying, all right, what have I been doing? Is it working? Right? If it is, great. How can I do more, better? If it's not, what else is out there? And I always just say, like, hey, look over here in the corner. There's sync licensing over there, and it's $1 billion industry, or I don't know, maybe multi-million. It's a huge industry. There's a lot of money being circulated on an annual basis, right? And just to give you an idea, I mean, sync fees, like the one-time payment that you can make for your song being placed, they range from like, on the low end, like a few $100 all the way up to in the multiple thousands, like multiple hundreds of thousands sometimes, depending on how big the company is.
Of a penny. That's way higher than the 0.04. Did you get 0.004 of a penny?
Exactly.
On the streamers.
And now, I don't know if you heard, but now Spotify is not paying under 1,000 plays.
Yeah.
So there's even less money to be made. Not that that was a big payout in the first place, but I mean, it just goes to show the direction they're heading in. So I just tell people, like, look at what's working, look at what's not working. And this thing, it takes time. It takes time to learn how to do it. It takes effort to meet people, make relationships, submit your music. But I mean, really, the time's going to pass either way. So it's,
it's about like, the synchronization. It's kind of like when I was working with these video game guys, is like syncing to that Unreal Engine or any of these video game engines. It is a certain like technical process. And I'm a programmer, and I work with programs, so I understand that. And so there's some things you have to do, and you can get to it through your DAW. You could get through it through your, but it still is possible to have like a fusion jazz type of thing that was made like in the 70s that has nothing, that was never put through a DAW.
Yeah.
And still have that be in the background. You don't have to be totally on the BPM.
Yeah.
because you could have something that's like Velvet Underground. That's not on the BPM, right?
Yeah.
Sun Ra, that's not on the BPM, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of music that doesn't necessarily have to fit being perfect. Like I
Absolutely.
kind of believe in a happy accident.
Yeah.
I kind of believe in stream of consciousness, flow state type of recording.
Mm.
And I'm a big purveyor of just, putting on the multi tracks and then letting my modes kind of be what they are. And
Yeah.
being a modular synthesis, we do a lot of CV experiments or experiments
Yeah.
with LFOs and envelope generators and letting things build into these sound paintings.
Yeah.
And they kind of represent point in time structures. Now you can put them into a DAW and you
Mm.
could get them to fit the piece that you're working on.
Yeah.
But when they were created more like a painter throwing paint at the canvas.
Yeah. I
You
love
know,
that.
so that's the type of mindset I have, and I just was always wondering, like, well, are they saying that you can't get your music into sync licensing if it's coming from that kind of place, and it has to be like into a perfect time sync? When I think there's other forms that sometimes in movies you might want that emotional kind of weird hypnotic thing or something that's kind of
Absolutely.
off the wall. So it doesn't necessarily have to be that pop song or
Yeah.
that hip hop song
Absolutely.
or that EDM song. It could be something else.
Yeah. And another thing is like, so many artists do this, but you can have multiple sort of avatars in your music, right? Like, and a lot of art, like what I'm saying is a lot of artists, they have their artist projects and then they have their sync projects because they
Hmm.
want to keep them a little separate because maybe they do want to keep their artist project coming from more of a pure place of creativity and truth and they want it to feel less manufactured, right?
Hmm.
And there's probably sync opportunity for that music too. But then what a lot of artists do is they say, "All right, well, let me learn this specific skill of writing music for film and TV and then have this separate project where I get to go in and be a little more manufactured and a little more intentional about the choices I'm making based on,
Hmm.
the rules of sync licensing." So the point is that it's not black and white, there's space for it all and you just have to figure out what feels good and fun and sustainable for you.
So it also kind of probably is that agent or the booking or the agency. Like if you're somebody that's a fusion jazz or you're an avant-garde, right?
Mhm.
And there's some indie film or some kind of indie project that needs that, right? And it might
Absolutely.
not be, and like you said, if you're not into pop, like how many people are trying to be Taylor Swift, right? How many
Right.
people are trying to be Beyonce?
Right.
Like, if you're not even playing that game, you're doing something else.
Mhm.
You might not have as much competition, and you just got to
Exactly.
find the right agent
Exactly.
that can get you into those projects because they do exist. It's just you haven't been able to find them. And what are the kind of starting points for finding that right person or agency that represent your work? If you know who you are as an artist,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
it's like I want to see if I can get my unique vision to be part of this world.
Yep. So here's what I'll say to that. Find some TV shows or movies that use your type of music, right? And depending on how non-mainstream your music is, you might have to go into you know, the subgenres on Netflix and Hulu, right?
Yeah,
But
indie
find
films.
yeah, the indie films, right? But find some things, find some validation, right? Or proof of concept, if you will. Um, and then what you'll do is you'll go on IMDb, and that film or that TV show probably has, a record on IMDb. And what you have to do is go into the show notes or the credits and see if you can find the music supervisor, right?
Oh,
So the music supervisor is the person whose job it is to source the music for the
for
project.
the project. Oh, and there's
So
probably tons of pieces of music on that project.
absolutely. And how they source the music is through the licensing agencies, right? So what you'll do is you'll find the music supervisor, and then really you just kind of have to go stealth mode on Google for a little bit. And you can usually find them on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, whatever.
Hmm.
And you can usually figure out what agencies they work with that way, right? Or you
Oh,
can try
wow.
to get in touch with them directly, right? I wouldn't off the bat, send them a cold message with your music, right? I would, be a considerate human and message them and say, "Hey, I noticed you worked on this project. I love the musical choices. Just trying to learn, how to get started in sync. Any pointers?" Right. And then you can start a relationship that way. I mean, maybe not everybody will reply, but somebody will, right? People
Mhm.
are nice. They're busy, but they love, generally people love to be helpful, especially if you approach it in a respectful way, right? So that's what I would say to anybody who's looking for a starting point. Follow that process until you get a couple conversations going, and that should get you where you need to go eventually.
Yeah, because you're more into the human relationship, kind of old school, not just using the net to like throw your like LinkedIn resume at some
Right.
agency. You'd
Right.
actually DM somebody, have a conversation, figure out, not not just cold call them, but try to figure out if you can approach them and
Yep.
not hit them with 100 things at once. Like
Exactly.
trying to you're just trying to ask a question. And what I found what's interesting is the podcasting has given me opportunities
Oh, I'm
because
sure.
I had over 1,000 episodes on this podcast. And you think of it as like a Rolodex. And I've
Mm,
talked to producers and I've talked to other bands
yeah.
and I've found out like what labels they're on. I know what things they're doing. And I've,
Yep.
I've, I've jumped into projects when I've been able to do stuff.
Yeah.
Just because of doing the podcast. I got the beta test for SoundCloud. I'm
Oh,
beta
cool.
testing for this other developer right now. And it's kind of just because I show up,
Mhm.
because I'm consistent,
Mhm.
and because I have people who are into music or into creativity, filmmakers, authors, painters, actors, I have a kind of a been able to use that to kind of not as my general kind of resource
Yep.
because I'm trying to build a community of creators
Yep.
through the
Absolutely.
podcast, and then that in itself leads to opportunities, and I could get cold people coming talking to me
Mhm.
saying, "Hey, they want this or they want that." And so I think if you put yourself out there, you can, or you get into a community or you
Yep.
get into a collective, you can find like-minded individuals, right? And so that ends
Absolutely.
up creating that kind of face to face or video to video talking.
Absolutely. Yeah, you gotta I love that you said you gotta just show up, That's half the battle is just continuing to show up, especially when you're not seeing results right away. Because I think that's when a lot of people quit. They quit too early because they put a little effort in, they don't see the results, and then they're like, "Okay, well, it must not be for me," or whatever, in this immediate gratification society. If we don't get results yesterday, we feel like they're never coming. So yes, show up. And another thing is there are so many Facebook groups and little communities like that, that are made for people who are trying to do sync licensing. I mean, obviously I'm building a community of my own if you choose to work with me. But even if you want to just go the free route, there's so many groups on Facebook to join and just start meeting with people, chatting, and just start writing songs and seeing where things go. Because when you meet someone, like you said, you meet by osmosis their whole network, right? So it's a really great and quick way to kind of make moves.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've always been into kind of showing up and also potentially throwing it at the wall in
Yeah,
terms of the music. Like if you don't ever show anybody your work, you have no idea. So if you use like
right.
SoundCloud as your beta test, right, and you put your stuff out and then you get feedback, and then I make choices on which songs I'm actually going to put into albums or
Sure.
which
Yep.
album. So you kind of use that kind of mixtape kind of what the people did, back in the day. You put the things you think are going to be bangers and you put them on a mixtape. You bring them around the neighborhood,
Right.
and the SoundClouds of the neighborhoods or the YouTubes, or you put out a
Absolutely.
clip, you put out a TikTok, and then you get the buzz, and then you get but that the buzz don't happen if you like the painter that's in the loft and you got 100 paintings and you say it's not ready to go to the gallery.
Right.
It's never going to happen if you never go to
Exactly.
the gallery.
Exactly. Yeah, you got to show up. You got to do it. You got to put yourself out there. Totally.
Yeah, I mean, because people don't realize, like William Blake is a great Victorian poet. Like his stuff was not known in the Victorian age. They found it in a bar.
Oh,
They
wow.
found
That's
his.
cool.
They put the songs of innocence and experience. He didn't really wasn't a good promoter, but he
Mm,
etched those poems in acid on plates with artwork,
wow.
so they became like eternal. So
That's cool.
he's one of the only Victorian poets that wasn't famous in his time. It
Mm,
was found after, and people found the songs of innocence and experience. But he had this kind of notion, well, I should make my stuff last. So
mm,
he etched it with this beautiful artwork.
that's
And
cool.
and I always tell people, it's like, you think about Lou Reed and the Velvets with Andy Warhol, that was very underground, but
Yeah.
everybody who heard them became like producers.
Yeah.
Everybody who heard Alex Chilton and Big Star, they became producers, in the whole alternative movement in the 90s, late 80s was all inspired by either like Big Star, Alex Chilton's Big
Yeah.
Star, or Velvet Underground. So
Yeah.
just because you can put if you put the music out there, people will find it even if it wasn't popular.
Yeah.
It can
Absolutely.
drive a whole movement later.
Yeah. That's true. Yeah. I mean, I believe as musicians, we all have something to say that somebody else needs to hear. So even if it's not financially motivated, I think it's important to make and share the music that's on your heart. So glad you said that.
Do you think people should put a lot of energy into streaming when they know what the payout is, or use it for what it's good for? And do sync licensing like combined as a strategy, or would you say, well, maybe you should put more time into your sync strategy than you're trying to get on playlist strategy? What
Well,
would be
I'm biased because I teach people how to do sync, but even if from an unbiased perspective, I mean, I try to, walk the talk. I don't put any energy really into streaming because I know that my efforts are better spent trying to land sync placements. I mean, just financially speaking, let's say I make a song, right? And then I have two paths to take. I can put that song on Spotify and hope for the best and, try to and share it on Facebook and TikTok and make a bunch of content and try to get it to go viral and try to get people to stream it. And, let's say that takes me a total of 50 hours, right? Even if that's successful, let's say I get 20,000 streams. What is that, like $3 or
like 30
something?
bucks,
Right,
30,
30
30
bucks.
bucks or something?
Right? I can do the same
It's
I can
very
do I
small.
exactly. I can have the same song, spend 1 hour submitting it to my licensing agencies, and then in 6 months, get a check for $500. I mean, to me,
Yeah,
that's
with
obvious,
more bang for the buck. Yeah,
right?
it's
Like,
kind of like, it's a strategy. Like if you're a band and you play shows,
yeah,
like would you spend tons of money trying to get on a playlist, or would you produce your own vinyl and sell it at the show on your merch table with your
right.
shirts? You're going to
Exactly.
make more money with your merch t-shirt and your vinyl signed copy, even if you only did 100 or 200 of them.
Yep,
You'll make more cash than you will trying to get that on a thing. Because even if you got 50,000 plays,
yep,
even if you got 100,000 plays, then don't make any money. You'll make
exactly.
more money selling the CD and the shirt
Yeah.
and a button
I
and a
always say
poster.
unless you have money to spend on ads, right, that can just push thousands of people to your Spotify so that it boosts you in their algorithm and they start putting you on huge playlists. Unless you're at that level, streaming should just be like the side thing, right? And then you
Mhm.
should focus your efforts on other sources of income like sync licensing or selling merch or whatever other creative ways people are using now to make money from music.
Yeah, live performing. Like
Yeah.
it's like, I get on some sites like that we do live streaming, and
Yep.
they're live streaming. Put more effort into doing live streaming
Yep.
than monetizing, selling your T-shirt on these live streams or your custom album. And so you set it up so you've got your Shopify store, whatever you set up so you
Exactly.
have a store.
Yep.
You get a bunch of diehard fans that want to hear you. You
Yep.
do like these unplugged or fully plugged out. I've had some bedroom producer concerts where I had bands from like Australia and Sweden and South
Hmm.
Africa, and they played live for 3 days. and people, sold their merch, sold their
Yeah.
t-shirts, sold their, and it was a better experience
Yeah.
than trying to get on a playlist.
Yeah. Well, also think about like people watch these TV shows and movies that your song's playing on. That's like free exposure. It's actually paid exposure because you get
Oh yeah,
paid
just
to
yes,
get exposed, right? Because it's your music's not playing to deaf ears, right? It's people are watching these things.
it's not
Thousands,
you
if not
paying.
millions of people are watching these things, right? So they're
Yeah, it
hearing
was
your
like these.
music and someone's bound to be interested, right?
Well, it's like the reverse. You got people paying to go on a playlist, and
Right.
they're paying all this money, and you only got 50,000 plays. Well, that's not. It sounds like a lot,
Mhm.
but like in the world that we live in, you got to get like 5 million, 100 million,
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
billion to make any money. And even the big artists are complaining that when they get a billion plays, like Snoop Dogg is like, I don't see the cash I think I should get.
Yeah.
So they're even saying like it doesn't look like the money I want. And they were like, I don't want nothing to do with it. So they're
Yeah.
dropping out of it and going into other things because it's like it's not even giving them what they got on iTunes. It's not
Yeah.
even giving them what they got when they had the CDs in the store.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, and just to get like, nerdy for a second, it's a basic supply and demand issue, right? Because I don't know if you know this, but there's about, and this, don't quote me on this number, but it's about 40 to 50,000 songs are uploaded to Spotify per day, right? So
Yeah,
to
because
say that the competition
oversaturation.
is fierce and the supply severely outweighs the demand is an understatement. So you have to figure out a way to rise above the noise so significantly that you're reaching those high 100,000s, millions of streams, right? Or you might as well refocus your efforts until you, like I said, have the capacity, the resources to maximize streaming in the way that you would actually see a return.
Yeah, I mean, you have to have like a whole marketing machine to make
Yeah.
to hit the billion streams.
Yeah.
And even then, the big stars are saying like, I'm questioning the accounting on these billion streams.
Right.
So even the big guys, like even when they get it, they're like, that's still not where I'm getting my money. I'm getting my
Right.
money with this deal with this liquor company or
Yeah.
with the soda company or with
Right.
the clothing company. I'm making
Right.
more money doing that than I am for my music. And it's kind of sad that music has been devalued to the point where there was a point where they had a $16 CD and you got so much money from it. You got maybe
Right.
$1, $2 if you were a big guy.
Right.
If you weren't a big guy, maybe you got 30 cents.
Right.
but
Yep.
at least you got something. And that's where Prince was making all these arguments back in the day. And people were saying, what's he talking about? Well, he was talking about something real,
Yeah.
about owning the master
Yep.
and understanding like, well, if I own the master when they license it, I'm going to get the money. If I don't
Yep.
own the master, then I'm not going to get the money.
Yeah. Which is why Taylor Swift re-recorded all her music, right?
Yeah.
Just to
Yeah.
comment.
That
On
was
that.
like why Prince did what he did. Like he
Yeah.
started going direct. He's
Yeah.
one of the first guys that did his own website. And I was one of the fans. I would get Prince albums and he would have like, maybe 10,000 copies, very rare things.
Yeah.
A big star like him was selling direct,
Yeah. That's awesome.
very low output. And now, it's amazing that what
It's such
they
a Prince
did.
move.
It was so cool though. They actually get this like very low volume stuff.
Yeah. Well, yeah,
Uh,
you feel like you have something special.
Like
Yeah.
getting something from the replacements of Who's Kado or
Yeah.
REM when they were on IRS. It's like he was operating like an indie band.
Right. Right.
And I'm like, that was cool.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. He was forecasting the future of music. Yeah.
That's interesting because, I'm always looking, to try to find like the heat in the underground. And there's
Yeah.
still a lot of cool bands in the underground that still do it. That
Oh,
still
yeah.
come up, but MTV isn't playing music. And so, like, you get it from wherever you get it from. But
Yeah.
it's just, there is a cool, underground. I've been talking to bands in Germany and Iceland and Netherlands because I'm in the synth stuff. Like, so
Mhm.
a lot of synth energy is coming from like Europe and Japan and places like that. But it seems like, if you think you're gonna you find that scene like CBGB scene anymore. It just seems like, oh, maybe that's not there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the sync licensing is the new scene for the new world, but
Right.
you still like you might have like you want to show up at the Eurorack convention, right?
Right.
You want to show up at the synth head convention in Norway,
Hmm.
and you go. You still do things like that, and you can live at a lower level. Like if you
Right.
don't have the expectation that you're going to sell 1,000,000 units,
Right.
if you can survive on selling 50,000 units or 10,000 units, but you're getting all the money,
Right.
then you can have a different paradigm and you can be sustainable. But if you're setting yourself up that you think you got to be making like X,
Right.
that's the problem, I think, right?
Yeah, that's true too. Because their success is, it's a spectrum. It's not all or nothing. And so, and that's another thing uh, that I coach a lot on is setting reasonable expectations and also defining success for you, for yourself, because I think there's a lot of pressure in this kind of age of viral, that if you don't land it huge, then you're not successful at all. And that's just not true. We don't go to the pizza shop down the street and say because they're not Pizza Hut that they're not
Yeah, they're
successful,
not good. Yeah,
or they're
you
not
can.
good, right? Like they're great, they're valuable, they're small business, they're crucial to the health and happiness of the community, right? So it's just a matter of figuring out what that needs to look like for you to feel like good in yourself, and then managing that as you go along, and also allowing it to change as you grow and change as a person.
Yeah, because you get a lot of bands. I like the YOLO Tango. They're not the biggest band in the world, but they're very consistent
Yeah.
with their output, and they show up and they know who their audience is,
Yep.
and they're never going to try to get into the top 10 intentionally. They do what they do,
Yeah.
and the fans are into them. Like any of the bands I was into, like the Husker Do's, the Replacements, the REMs,
Yeah.
things like that. Like there was a certain level that they would go to, and they still learned how to exist,
Yeah.
because I think they just found like that kind of sweet spot
Yep.
where Bob Mold and Westerberg, they found a spot where they could still
Yeah.
be artists,
Totally.
and they didn't have to be everybody's artist.
Right.
They're fans artists. They're their
And
own
I think people don't realize the level of sacrifice you have to make to be everyone's artist, because you have to, and I mean, I'm not saying this from experience, but just from kind of being in the music industry as long as I have been, the more people you want to appeal to, the more, the less of a statement you can make, because you'll be more divisive. And so you have to consider that as you go along your journey and think, well, if I have to water down who I am and to appeal to more people, maybe that's worth it to some people. Obviously it is, right? But
yeah.
I think for many people it's not. And that's not a sacrifice they're willing to make in order to just, reach that level of popularity. So it's just
Yeah,
something to
if you
think
got
about.
a vision, if you got the vision, like Prince was the big example. Like one of the most experimental, popular musicians ever to be on the stage. You know,
Yeah.
he's like at the level of like a Sun Ra or Davis,
Yeah.
Ray Miles Davis, or Coltrane or Hendrix, and he would choose not to be popular. He
Mm.
would choose to do the work he wanted to do.
Yeah.
He could just replicated Purple Rain over and over because he could have done it note for note.
Yeah.
He didn't want to do that. And there are artists like that. One
Yeah.
of the greatest jazz bands I ever like everybody into it, but Sun Ra from like 58 into the
Mm.
80s. Amazing bebop, funk, fusion, experimental jazz band. One of the first
Yeah.
bands to use synthesizers.
Yeah.
Everybody today that's like the tons of artists are inspired by them, but they weren't commercially that successful.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean they weren't good.
Right.
They're like they're an iconic kind of canon level band now.
Yeah.
People look at them like the Velvets, in rock. They look at
Yeah.
Sunrise like, wow, this foundational band. But they weren't making that. They weren't in the big top reel of the day.
Right.
They, that's not where they were. But they did
Yeah.
what they wanted.
Yeah. And I bet that brought them a certain level of satisfaction.
Yeah, I mean, 'cause you can put your vision, it doesn't have to be diluted.
Yeah,
And then if you can take that vision and actually get into something like sync licensing, that's cool because that could actually start affecting the world. Because like, if
yeah,
you can get your song into some popular TV show,
yeah,
and it's not brand X, it's not the typical thing. It can
right,
start to change the taste, so it ends up being like as foundational
right.
as like the Talking Heads coming out of CBGBs,
Yep,
or the
totally.
Ramones coming out of CBGBs, because or Blondie coming out of CBG, because
Yeah,
now you've changed the musical taste in a different way. You kind of came
right,
out from the other way, and then
right,
you could end up getting on the big playlist
right,
like, coming that way, right? You can spin
totally.
around. You come from the other side.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I love it. There's so many ways to slice and dice it and to come at it. But yeah, that's another thing I tell people is sync writing for sync licensing. There is a certain level of, you know, manufacturing you have to do, but
Mhm,
it doesn't mean that you need to sacrifice authenticity. As a matter of fact, if you write inauthentically, it comes across as
mhm.
trying too hard to write
Totally.
music for film and TV, and it ends up working against you, because remember, like, what is the role of music in film and TV? It's to help the
The mood.
listener understand exactly what they should be feeling, what the characters are feeling, what's going on emotionally in the scene, right?
Mhm.
So it has to feel authentic. People have to be able to connect to it in a real way,
Yeah, you
and
gotta
it's
feel it,
very
like,
powerful. Yeah,
whatever you're composing for, if you feel it, like, it's kinda like this it's like your audience, like, people say, "Well, if I'm a musician and I'm during the COVID
yeah,
and I don't have my audience, then I don't know if I'm hitting it or not because I
right,
don't get the feedback."
right,
So it's like you watch that piece of film or you watch that ad and you have to feel it. And if you have enthusiasm and you don't feel like it doesn't feel like it's forced, if
right.
it feels like it's natural, even though you might have had to be like Steely Dan and go over and over and over.
Yeah,
Like those guys are like famous for being very, very, very tight on their compositions and
mm,
very, very know what they want. And if they don't hear it, then they don't get it right. They kept on working on it till they refined it.
yeah,
Yeah, but it's authentic. Like you
mhm,
listen to Steely Dan, that's very highly composed,
yeah,
but it doesn't sound like other things,
yeah,
right? So you can still do that.
yeah,
In my opinion,
absolutely.
I think you can still have your impact and have that kind of power, of
Yeah,
your own vision.
absolutely.
That's cool. So, like, you're building a business that's, at its heart is creative and then
Yeah,
gives you freedom
yeah,
in a world where people say, "Well, music, you can't make money from music," and you're flipping that.
yeah, you are. Right on its head.
Well, that's cool because the people like everything like, my daughter's a graphic designer, and, like, everything that's out there has to have graphic design. Yeah,
Yeah,
there's graphic design that has to be done for everything, and initially, she didn't know if she was gonna be able to how much work she would get. Now she gets tons of work,
yeah,
right? And it's like you have to like push things away. You get so there's a lot of opportunity once the door opens. Like
yeah,
once you get out there and people know your work.
absolutely. You just gotta start. You gotta start somewhere, and like I mentioned earlier, you have to go into it with the mindset of knowing that there's gonna be a learning curve and that you're not gonna have success, right off the bat. It's not the viral post sort of
Mhm.
thing, it's a long-term commitment to the success of your music and the financial success of your music, but once you get in it, and you get moving, it's kinda like starting a new gym routine. Like, there's gonna be so much
Yeah,
resistance at first, but once you get in it and you start
you get
doing
the
it,
flow.
you're gonna
Yeah,
get
I
in
get
the
into
flow, you're gonna feel good, you're gonna see results, but it takes time. It takes that initial period of like, "Oh, this sucks," before you start to really feel like you're getting in the flow.
Well, I think if you're a musician and you're creative, everybody knows about how many takes it takes, when you're doing stuff, right?
Yeah,
So like if you're a and I've been playing since I was 17, I didn't give up. So I know a little bit about that. So
yeah,
so the amount of, if you're going to spend a lot of time taking doing 50 versions of a song.
Mhm.
Like if you're gonna go and learn different genres and push yourself, it's the same thing. Like if you're gonna go like, well, I'm gonna go do bebop and I'm gonna push into fusion jazz, and I'm gonna go and
Mhm.
try to do this like you know alternative thinking like Coltrane. In fact, like, well, I'm gonna try to approach my guitar like Coltrane approaches the horn.
Mm.
Well, that's gonna take time,
Yeah.
right? It's gonna take a lot of work.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen right away. So
Yep.
if you think about the project that you do, is like if you put as a creative person, you put so much effort in trying to create your unique piece of work. Since to me, it's like the same effort if I have to learn how to fit into this paradigm to
Yeah.
get picked up. Is like it's the same work I did when I'm trying to have my own vision.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. It's all process, right? And I mean, I like to tell people like you're gonna put the effort either way, right? So you
Yeah.
might as well invest in something that has a better chance of a return. Can be as simple as
That,
that.
no, typically, just the question is like, what's the average length of a lot of the pieces that you're actually marketing and actually selling?
I mean, anywhere between 2 and 4 minutes. It's
Hmm.
nothing unusual.
That's cool. That's
Yeah.
good to know. Because I was wondering, because some people are like, boy, is that like 30 seconds? Is it like 60
I mean,
seconds?
here's the thing though. I mean, and I teach on this fully, but you have to kind of write music, and when you said 30 seconds, this made me think of this. You have to write the parts of your songs. I mean, and this is if you're writing more, mainstream music. You have to write them with very distinct sections so that the music editors can more easily, slice it up and fit it
Slice
into the
and dice them
scenes.
out. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's just something to note, but there are some opportunities I've seen where they're requesting just 30-second spots. And those are fun because you only have to write 30 seconds of music.
Mhm.
But for the most part, they want full songs,
Full songs.
at least 2 minutes, with at least a full cycle of, intro, verse,
Or
chorus.
like a traditional song starts out the one that could like we have so many beat focused songs today
Yep.
that kind of go back to the 70s. You had songs that have intros, they
Yep.
have, they have an alternative melody, and they get, if
Yep.
you can do a band like Yes, you got a 7-minute song with like, every piece is like there's a movement.
Right.
Get bands like
Right.
Genesis, like that I'm into, like they had very defined kind of classical movements,
Yeah.
key changes, rhythm changes, timing changes, very complex pieces, right?
Yeah.
So, but even if you go back to a Carpenter song where they have the hook, you have the intro, you have the outro,
Yep.
you have structure. But some songs today they seem to be like more like bangers. They're like beat. It's a beat, it's focused, doesn't have a lot of
Yeah.
variation.
That's true.
So are
And I
they
mean,
looking for more variation, or are they looking for like bangers?
they're looking for, I mean, it's a variety, right? So it depends on the scene. It depends what they're looking for, but for them, as a rule of thumb, you want to give them as many hooks as they can to work with, because
Mhm.
that means, and this is more for ads, right? So writing for TV and movies is different because it's more story and narrative based, whereas ads are very emotion driven. Like they want you to feel a certain thing when you listen to the
Mhm.
ad, right? So, so yeah, there's a difference there, but once you gotta just kind of get in it and learn it, and then you get a feel for kind
What
of
the
what they're
pitch
looking
is.
for.
'Cause I
Yeah.
remember when I saw some pitches, they would have references and say,
Yeah.
listen, I want it to sound like this.
Mhm.
And I want the intro to be like this, and outro to be like this, and they very, very specific of what they were looking for.
Yep.
And they would tell you, like, this is the scene, this is the feeling, kind of
Yep.
overall, a lot of adjectives and, like, adverbs, and they're very, very kind of like, oh, it was like, oh, like, I'm like, like Star Wars composing, like
Yeah.
watching Star Wars and trying to build up. So when they're
Right.
going to go into the trench, I'm going to get the build up. I got to build that up.
Right.
Video
Right.
games are like that too.
Yeah.
If you have to compose for a video game, like you get an opportunity to maybe compose for like an hour,
Right.
and then you're watching the scenes like films,
Yeah.
and you have there's like ocean waves, like flow. The things getting exciting, things building up, and you're building up, and then you crash, go back down.
Yeah.
Feel like
Yeah. The
yeah,
dynamics. Yeah.
the
And
boss scenes,
that's another
different things.
note. Yeah, that's another note, is that writing for film and TV in terms of sync is very different than writing, like composing music for films.
Mhm.
Like that's a whole different thing, right? So like you can study film composition, and this is not that. This is writing songs, and then they're placed underneath scenes.
Understand. So it's like an
Sometimes
existing. Yeah.
between composed pieces, but
Yeah. You've
that
seen the
yeah,
music
so
directors, they'll mix things. You might
yeah,
start off with a Carpenter song and then
right,
seg into some other song.
exactly, yeah.
You know, it
I
might
mean,
have some.
just next time you're watching your favorite show, change your attention to listen to the music,
Mhm.
and you'll notice how it all kind of gets pieced together, and you'll notice that the songs aren't they're not played start to finish.
No,
They're
they
they're
just
spliced and
snip.
diced, and yeah,
Yeah, for effect. Like they're looking
exactly,
for that lyric to match the dialogue or to match the
exactly,
feeling of the scene. Or if
exactly.
it's instrumental that, they're trying to, it's melodramatic. Somebody's
Yep,
walking on the beat, somebody's crying, so you're doing something there. It feels like a little bit like film if you're doing instrumental less than voice. Like if I'm a
yep,
synthesist, I can do a lot of stuff with layering tons of synths and
hmm
sound very orchestral.
yeah,
Or I could get very funky, I could get very layered, or I could get kind of off, otherworldly and be like,
yep.
"Oh, I'm in space." It's like some space scene. But, like, depending on the feeling, so are there a lot of opportunities for the songs with the vocals or the songs without the vocal, total
I would say
instrumentals?
I would say equal, but most people, most editors or supervisors are looking for songs with vocals because they have the option, right? Because you can always take
Mhm.
the vocals away and use just the instrumental, but
Take
if
them
you
off.
just have an
Mhm.
instrumental, they don't have a vocal to work with. So I know it's an added, it's a much, it complicates the process and adds a lot more work, but um, it also helps really tell the story of the song too. So
Mhm.
yeah,
So having a full song with giving them the option to mute the vocal track, they can just choose to
exactly,
mute it or not. So if they
exactly.
hear something they don't want that vocal, they could or could have somebody else sing it.
Yeah, true.
If
Yeah.
they like so is that like a thing where somebody likes the song lyrics but doesn't like the person singing it? Would they actually go and then have somebody else sing it?
They would just probably send it back and say, "You need a different vocalist on this," before they even used it.
Vocalist? No, actually have you go and do it.
Yeah,
Oh,
they
so
would
they
either
don't
like
go and change it out. Y
no, because I mean, that's like a rights issue, right? Like, they would need permission, and that's like
Mhm.
they just won't accept it. The agency won't accept it into the catalog. They'll come back to you and just say, "You need to get a different vocalist on this," you know? It doesn't happen often, though,
Hmm.
at least in
Oh,
my
that's interesting.
experience, but I'm sure it happens.
That's
Yeah,
cool.
but you
Well,
get good
this is
at it
very
as you go, you know?
well, I think I wanna let people know again with that link we have for you, Nismah uh, Nismah Osman and then you can click on that, and maybe you can tell people if they click on that for that call, is that what they sign up for? They get a call with you to
Yeah.
talk to you.
We just chat. I mean, I'm in the business of helping musicians escape burnout, and learn better ways of making money from their music, and, if you click that link, just a simple 15-minute Zoom or phone call, and we'll just chat, and I'll see if I'm the right person to help you.
That's awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's cool. I think there's a lot of musicians that we've had on the show that want to get into this and probably
Yeah.
don't know the first thing about starting and wondering, like the pitfalls of like, whoa, I don't know which agency to go to. I
Yeah.
don't know how to start this. So that yeah, if you can give people that kind of advice, I think there's a lot of people will be checking you out.
We go through everything, and it's a 1 year it's a 1 year program where I'm taking you step by step through it all, and we get it done. We do some good work.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So yeah, I might take part in myself if I open up my schedule. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
but thank you very much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. It was a
Yeah,
blast.
because it's like you never know when there's an opportunity. This is a cool thing to get into. It's very entrepreneurial, and a lot of us as musicians, that's where our spirit is,
Yeah.
and we have that creative spirit. But you want to be able to have your piece make money.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, most
Absolutely.
musicians, oh, it doesn't matter. It's like what does matter. You do want people to like it. You want
Yeah.
people to get into it, and if you can actually, showing value by getting paid
Mhm.
is not everybody's goal, but it makes you feel good
Yeah,
and can
and it's
keep you
great
going and
great
buy
to
that
make
next
money.
guitar or your next bass or your next horn or yeah,
Yeah,
or more
exactly.
equipment for your studio. Like, yeah, it's like, why not? Why not?
Yeah, 100%.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you,
Have a
Phantom. It
good
was a
night.
pleasure. Alright, you too. Bye.